The room went silent the moment Damon Cole opened his mouth. Elena Marsh stood in the center of the great hall, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her, and none of them were friendly. She had not wanted to come to this gathering. She had begged her friend Claire not to bring her here, but Claire had insisted, saying it would be fun, that nobody would even notice one extra human face in a crowd of wolves. Claire had been wrong. The moment Elena stepped into the hall, every wolf in the room turned toward her at once, as if her scent had struck them like a wave. Whispers spread through the crowd faster than fire through dry grass. A human. Why is there a human here? Someone get her out. And then he appeared. Damon Cole moved through the crowd like the room belonged to him, because it did. Orn. He was the future alpha of the Cole pack, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of a stormy sky. Elena had heard stories about him from Claire, who worked as a caterer for pack events. Claire said he was strict, serious, and never smiled. Elena had pictured someone cold and unpleasant. She had not expected her breath to catch the second she saw him. Damon stopped a few feet away from her, and for one long moment, neither of them said a word. His gray eyes locked onto hers, and something shifted in his expression, something raw and unguarded, that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Elena felt a strange pull in her chest, like an invisible thread had been tied between them, and someone had just given it a sharp tug. She did not know what that feeling meant. She would not understand it for years. Damon's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, as if he were fighting to keep it steady. Who let a human into this hall? The question was not really a question. It was an accusation. Elena's cheeks burned as more whispers rippled through the crowd. She searched for Claire, but her friend had been pushed back by the shifting bodies and was nowhere in sight. I was invited, Elena said, lifting her chin, even though her knees felt weak. I did not know there would be a problem. There is always a problem when a human wanders into pack territory, Damon said. His eyes never left hers, but there was something wrong with the way he was looking at her now, something like panic hidden beneath the anger. You need to leave. Elena felt heat rush to her face, this time from anger rather than embarrassment. She had done nothing wrong. She had walked into a room and existed, and that alone seemed to be enough to make this powerful, controlled man look at her like she was a threat. Fine, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. I did not ask to be here in the first place. She turned to leave, weaving through the crowd of wolves who stepped back from her, as if she carried some kind of disease. Nobody offered to walk her out. Nobody said a kind word. She kept her head high the entire way to the door, refusing to let anyone see how badly her hands were shaking. She almost made it outside before Damon's voice stopped her. Wait. She turned, half expecting an apology. Instead, she found him standing several feet away, his expression a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like fear. His wolf was close to the surface, she would later learn, clawing at him from the inside, begging him to close the distance between them, to never let her walk out that door. But Damon did not understand what he was feeling. He only knew that it terrified him. You are human, he said, as if she needed reminding. I could never be tied to someone like you. Whatever this is, it ends here. Elena did not understand what he meant by tied, and she was too hurt and too proud to ask. She simply stared at him, waiting for an explanation that never came. When none arrived, she shook her head slowly. You don't know anything about me, she said quietly, and clearly, I don't want to know anything about you. She walked out into the cold night air and did not look back, even though every step away from that hall felt heavier than the last. She would spend years wondering why his words had cut so deep, why a stranger's rejection had felt like losing something she never had. She did not know, that night, that a wolf's rejection leaves a mark, an invisible wound that only fades when the bond is finally accepted. She only knew that her chest ached in a way it never had before, and that she wanted to be as far away from Damon Cole and his world as possible. Claire found her outside, breathless from pushing through the crowd. Elena, I am so sorry. I did not know it would be like that, Claire said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Are you all right? I'm fine, Elena lied. Can we just go home? The drive back to the city was quiet. Elena stared out the window at the trees blurring past, her mind replaying the moment Damon's eyes had met hers. There had been something there, something powerful and undeniable, before he shut it down completely. She told herself it did not matter. She told herself she would never see him again. She was wrong about that too, but it would take 5 years for her to find out. That night, alone in her apartment, Elena sat on the edge of her bed and rubbed at a strange, faint mark on her wrist that she did not remember getting. It looked almost like a small crescent shape, pale against her skin, and it had not been there that morning. She frowned at it for a long moment before deciding she was too exhausted to think about it and pulling her sleeve down over it. She did not know that the mark was proof of a truth neither she nor Damon was ready to face. She did not know that somewhere across the city, in a house on the edge of pack territory, Damon Cole was standing in his room, gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white, trying to convince himself that he had done the right thing. His wolf did not agree. His wolf paced inside him like a caged animal, snarling and clawing, furious at what he had just done. Damon had felt it the second Elena walked into that hall, a pull so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. He had felt his wolf rise up inside him, desperate and reverent, recognizing something in her that Damon himself refused to accept. A human. His wolf could not have chosen a human. It was impossible. It went against everything he had been taught since he was a child, every rule about pack purity and strength and legacy that his father had drilled into him. An alpha did not choose a human mate. An alpha's mate had to be strong, had to be a wolf, had to be someone who could stand at his side through the trials that came with leading a pack. Or so he had always believed. Damon told himself the pull he felt was a mistake, some strange trick of fate that he could correct through sheer willpower. He told himself that if he ignored it long enough, it would fade. He did not know, that night, that rejecting a fated bond does not make it disappear. It only buries it, deep and painful, waiting to resurface when he least expected it. Outside his window, the moon hung high and silver, and somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf howled, a sound so mournful it seemed to carry across the entire territory. Damon's own wolf answered with a whimper, a sound Damon had never heard him make before. He did not sleep that night. Neither did Elena, though neither of them would ever know that they had spent those same dark hours staring at the ceiling, hearts aching for a reason neither of them understood. By morning, Elena had convinced herself that the strange evening was nothing more than an unpleasant memory to file away and forget. She had a life to live, a career to build, and she was not about to let one rude, arrogant man ruin her week. She got dressed, made coffee, and told herself firmly that she would never think about Damon Cole again. She almost believed it. Across the city, Damon dressed for a meeting with the pack elders, his face carefully arranged into the composed, controlled expression his position demanded. Nobody looking at him would have guessed that his chest still ached, or that his wolf had gone unusually quiet, retreating into some wounded corner of his mind. He walked through the halls of the pack house with his usual confidence, greeting members with brief nods, discussing territory boundaries and training schedules as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted the moment he looked into Elena's eyes, and no amount of denial could undo it. He simply did not know that yet. He would spend years believing he had made the right choice, that logic had triumphed over instinct, that duty mattered more than whatever strange pull he had felt in that hall. He was wrong. He would learn just how wrong, but not for a very long time. For now, both of them walked away from that night, carrying wounds they could not name, marks on their skin, and hearts that would not heal, and a distance between them that felt, at the time, permanent and absolute. Neither of them could have imagined that fate was simply waiting, patient and unshaken, for the day their paths would cross again. Weeks turned into months, and Damon Cole told himself, over and over, that he had made the correct decision. He repeated it to himself every morning as he trained new pack members, every afternoon as he sat through meetings with the elders, and every night as he lay awake staring at his ceiling, waiting for sleep that came slower and slower each time. His father, Alpha Gerald Cole, had noticed the change in him almost immediately. Gerald was a broad, weathered man, whose authority had never once been questioned within the pack. He watched his son with sharp eyes during a training session one afternoon, noting the way Damon's movements had grown stiff, his usual grace replaced by something forced and mechanical. "You are distracted," Gerald said, crossing his arms as the younger wolves scattered to give them privacy. "That is not like you." "I am fine," Damon said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just tired." Gerald studied him a moment longer, clearly unconvinced, but he did not push further. Instead, he changed the subject to something that made Damon's stomach twist even tighter. "It is time you considered a proper courtship," Gerald said. "Bianca Hart has expressed interest. Her family holds significant standing within the pack, and a match between you two would strengthen our position considerably." Damon nodded, though something inside him recoiled at the suggestion. He told himself it was nerves, nothing more. Bianca was beautiful, capable, and exactly the kind of mate an alpha was supposed to choose. She was strong. She was a wolf, and she came from a respected bloodline. She checked every box that mattered. Every box except the one his own instincts kept whispering about in the quiet hours of the night. He agreed to the courtship the following week. Bianca was pleased, warm, and attentive, walking beside him through pack gatherings with practiced elegance. She laughed at his jokes, asked thoughtful questions about pack matters, and seemed, by every outward measure, like the perfect partner for a future alpha. And yet, when Damon closed his eyes at night, it was not Bianca's face that appeared in his mind. It was a pair of warm brown eyes he had only seen once, framed by dark hair, belonging to a woman whose name he had never even learned. He hated himself for it. He told himself it was simply the strangeness of that encounter lingering in his memory, nothing more than curiosity about an unusual moment. He refused to call it anything else. He refused to acknowledge what his wolf already knew with absolute certainty. His wolf had grown quiet since that night, retreating deep into the corners of his mind, refusing to rise fully, even during training or hunts, when Damon needed his strength the most. It was as though some essential part of him had gone to sleep, or perhaps had simply given up trying to be heard. The pack healer, an older woman named Margaret with sharp eyes and a gentle voice, noticed the change during a routine checkup months into Damon's courtship with Bianca. "Your energy feels different," Margaret said, pressing her palm briefly against his chest as she performed the examination all pack members underwent twice a year. "Weaker somehow. Have you been sleeping well?" "Well enough," Damon said, though it was a lie. Margaret did not look convinced, but she did not press the matter. She simply made a note in her records and moved on to the next part of the examination, though her brow remained furrowed with quiet concern for the rest of the appointment. Damon left her office that day feeling more unsettled than he had in weeks. He told himself it was nothing, that pack leaders often felt the weight of responsibility more heavily than others, and that his fatigue was simply a natural result of his upcoming duties. He did not let himself consider the alternative explanation, the one that had been sitting quietly at the edges of his mind since the night he sent a human woman walking out into the cold. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena Marsh was doing everything in her power to move forward with her life. She had thrown herself into her studies at the university, determined to finish her degree in architecture ahead of schedule. She filled her days with classes, projects, and part-time work at a small design firm, leaving little room for her mind to wander back to that strange night at the pack gathering. Most days, it worked. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she found herself thinking about the man with storm-colored eyes, who had looked at her as though she were something precious, right before he called her unworthy of him. She hated that she still thought about him at all. She hated more that the memory of his rejection still stung, sharp and fresh, no matter how much time had passed. Claire tried to console her whenever the subject came up, which was rare, since Elena refused to talk about it more than necessary. "He was a jerk," Claire said one evening as they shared a meal in Elena's small apartment. "You are better off never seeing him again." "I know," Elena said, pushing food around her plate. "It's not like I even wanted anything from him. He looked at me like I mattered, and then like I was nothing, in the span of about 10 seconds. It messed with my head, that's all." Claire reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You are going to do incredible things, Elena, with or without some Wolfpack air validating your existence." Elena managed a small smile, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. She decided, that night, that she would stop letting the memory of Damon Cole take up space in her mind. She had bigger goals to focus on, a career to build, a future to create for herself that had nothing to do with pack politics or werewolf traditions. She did not know that her body carried a physical reminder of that night, a faint crescent mark on her wrist that she had noticed fading and reappearing at odd intervals, always slightly more visible on nights when the moon was full. She told herself it was some strange allergic reaction, nothing worth worrying about, and continued on with her life exactly as planned. Neither Elena nor Damon understood, during those long months of denial and distraction, that the bond between them was not something that could simply be ignored into non-existence. It remained, quiet but persistent, a thread stretched taut across the distance between their separate worlds, waiting for the moment when circumstances would finally pull it tight again. That moment was still years away, but it was coming, steady and unstoppable, the way all true things eventually find their way home. Elena's alarm went off at 6 in the morning, and for a moment, she considered ignoring it entirely. She had stayed up late finishing a project proposal, and her eyes felt heavy with exhaustion. But she had a class in 2 hours, and a part-time shift at the design firm right after. So she forced herself out of bed and into the small kitchen of her apartment, where she made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. 3 years had passed since the night at the pack gathering, though Elena rarely allowed herself to think about it anymore. She had built a life that felt entirely her own, filled with late nights studying architecture, early mornings sketching building designs before class, and a growing sense of pride in the person she was becoming. She was not the same uncertain young woman who had walked out of that hall feeling small and unwanted. She had grown into someone confident, capable, and determined to succeed on her own terms. Her professor, an elderly man named Harold Whitfield, had taken a particular interest in her work, praising her attention to detail and her ability to design spaces that felt warm and welcoming rather than cold and clinical. "You have a gift, Miss Marsh," he told her one afternoon after reviewing her latest project, a community library designed with wide windows and natural light flooding every corner. "Most students your age design buildings that look impressive on paper but feel lifeless in person. Yours feel alive." "Thank you, Professor Whitfield," Elena said, unable to keep the small smile from spreading across her face. "That means a lot coming from you." "I mean it," he said, adjusting his glasses as he studied her design once more. "Keep this up, and firms will be fighting over you before you even graduate." His words stayed with her for the rest of the day, filling her with a warmth she had not expected. She walked to her evening shift at the design firm with a lighter step, her mind already spinning with ideas for her next project. The firm, a small but respected practice run by a woman named Diane Foster, specialized in community-focused architecture, designing schools, libraries, and public spaces, meant to bring people together. Elena had been thrilled to land the internship 2 years earlier, and she had worked hard ever since to prove herself worthy of the opportunity. "Elena, good, you're here," Diane said as she walked through the door, barely looking up from the blueprints spread across her desk. "I need your eyes on this. The Ashford County project. They want a full proposal by next week." Elena set her bag down and moved closer, studying the rough sketches Diane had already started. "What kind of project is it?" "A community center," Diane said. "Multi-use space, meant to serve several small towns along the county border. It's a good opportunity for us, but the timeline is tight." Elena felt a familiar thrill of excitement at the mention of a new project. She loved nothing more than the early stages of design, when a blank page held endless possibilities. "I'd love to help," she said. "Where exactly is Ashford County?" Diane pulled up a map on her computer, pointing to a stretch of land northeast of the city, bordered by dense forest. "Right here. Beautiful area, actually. Lots of natural land around it. There's apparently some kind of private community nearby that owns most of the surrounding forest, though the details are a bit vague. Regardless, it's a wonderful opportunity for us." Elena nodded, her mind already racing with ideas for the design, completely unaware of the significance of the words Diane had just spoken. She had no reason to connect a private community bordering forested land with the pack world she had left behind 3 years earlier. She had buried that memory deep enough that it no longer surfaced in her everyday thoughts. She spent the following days pouring herself into research and design, sketching concepts late into the night, refining ideas until she felt confident in what she and Diane would present. She barely noticed the passage of time, so absorbed was she in the work she loved. Meanwhile, in a very different part of her life, that she had left behind entirely, Damon Cole was preparing for one of the most important transitions of his life. His father, Alpha Gerald Cole, had begun stepping back from daily pack duties, gradually transferring authority to Damon in preparation for his formal ascension as Alpha. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, though he carried it with the same disciplined composure he brought to everything else. He spent his days settling disputes among pack members, overseeing training programs for younger wolves, and negotiating boundary agreements with neighboring packs and human authorities alike. His courtship with Bianca had continued steadily, though it remained, in Damon's private thoughts, strangely hollow. They got along well enough. She was intelligent, capable, and genuinely seemed to care for him, but the deep, instinctive connection he had once glimpsed and immediately rejected had never appeared with her, no matter how much time they spent together. He told himself that was simply how courtships worked sometimes. Not every bond needed to be immediate and overwhelming. Some connections grew slowly, built on mutual respect and shared goals rather than instinct alone. He repeated this reasoning to himself so often that it had begun to feel almost true. His wolf disagreed, as it always had, but its protests had grown quieter over the years, worn down by constant suppression until they were little more than a faint ache Damon had learned to live alongside. Margaret, the pack healer, continued to monitor him with quiet concern during his checkups, though she had stopped voicing her worries aloud after Damon made it clear he did not wish to discuss the matter. She simply noted the persistent weakness in his energy and hoped, privately, that whatever troubled him would resolve itself in time. It was during one of these routine checkups that Margaret finally broached the subject again, unable to hold her tongue any longer. "Damon," she said, setting aside her instruments and looking at him directly, "I have known you since you were a boy. I have never seen your energy this weak, this hollow, without an obvious physical cause. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." Damon tensed slightly, but nodded for her to continue. "Has your wolf ever recognized someone," Margaret asked carefully, "that you chose not to accept?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to deny it, the same automatic denial he had offered himself for 3 years, but something in Margaret's steady, knowing gaze made the words die in his throat. "It does not matter," he finally said, his voice rougher than he intended. It was not a viable match. The pack needs a leader who makes decisions with his head, not his instincts. Margaret studied him for a long moment, sadness flickering across her weathered face. "A rejected bond does not simply disappear because you decide it should, Damon. It festers, it weakens you, slowly, over time, whether you acknowledge it or not. I have seen it happen to others. I fear I am seeing it happen to you now. I have made my choice," Damon said firmly, standing to signal the end of the conversation. "Please do not raise this again." Margaret did not push further, though the concern never left her eyes as she watched him leave her office. She had cared for this pack and its members for over 30 years, and she recognized the signs of a rejected bond when she saw them, even if the alpha heir refused to acknowledge the truth himself. That night, Damon stood on the balcony of his room, staring out at the vast stretch of forest that belonged to his pack, the same forest that bordered a county he had never had reason to think about, where a woman he had spent 3 years trying to forget was, at that very moment, sketching designs late into the night, equally unaware of how close their paths were about to become. Neither of them could see it yet, the way fate had already begun drawing them back together, patient and inevitable, indifferent to the walls they had both built to keep the past exactly where they believed it belonged. The Ashford County Town Hall buzzed with quiet activity as council members filed into their seats, papers shuffling and voices murmuring in preparation for the meeting. Elena stood near the front of the room, her presentation materials organized neatly on the podium, her heart beating with a mixture of excitement and nerves. This was the culmination of weeks of work, and she was determined to make Diane proud. Diane stood beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "You've got this. Your design is the best thing we've produced in years. Just breathe." Elena nodded, taking a steadying breath as the council chairperson called the meeting to order. She had presented projects before, but something about this one felt different, more important somehow, though she could not have explained why, even if someone had asked. The meeting proceeded smoothly through initial matters before the council chairperson finally called Elena and Diane forward to present their community center proposal. Elena stepped up to the podium, her presentation appearing on the screen behind her, and began speaking with the confidence she had worked years to build. She spoke about the design's focus on natural light, the flexible community spaces meant to serve everyone from young families to elderly residents, and the sustainable materials chosen to minimize environmental impact on the surrounding forest land. The council members nodded along, clearly impressed, occasionally jotting notes as she continued through her presentation. It was near the end of her presentation, as she was discussing the project's relationship with the neighboring private landowners, that the side door of the meeting room opened. Elena did not notice at first, too focused on her presentation to register the newcomer's arrival. But she felt it, a strange prickling sensation crawling up the back of her neck, an inexplicable awareness that something significant had just entered the room. She faltered slightly in her speech, glancing up instinctively toward the door. Her eyes met a pair of storm-gray eyes she had spent 3 years trying to forget. The rest of the room seemed to fade away. Damon Cole stood near the door, dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly, looking every bit as commanding and composed as she remembered, though something about him seemed different too, a subtle weariness around his eyes that had not been there before. He had frozen the moment he saw her, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion to shock, to something Elena could not quite name. Elena forced herself to look away, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. She stumbled slightly over her next sentence before catching herself and pushing forward, determined not to let this unexpected reunion derail 3 years of hard work. Damon took a seat near the back of the room, his gaze never once leaving her, his jaw tight with something that looked almost like pain. His wolf, silent for so long, roared to life inside him with such sudden force that he had to grip the arms of his chair to keep himself steady. Every instinct screamed at him to move closer, to close the distance that had stretched between them for 3 long years. But he forced himself to remain still, his training and discipline the only things holding him in place. Elena finished her presentation with a strength she did not know she still had, answering the council's questions with clear, confident responses, despite the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. When the council finally thanked her and Diane for their proposal and moved on to the next agenda item, Elena felt herself finally exhale, though the relief was short-lived. She could still feel his eyes on her from across the room. The meeting continued for another hour, covering various county matters that Elena barely absorbed, her mind spinning with questions she desperately wanted answered. What was Damon Cole doing at an Ashford County Town Hall meeting? Why did seeing him again make her chest ache with a feeling she could not name, somewhere between anger and longing? When the meeting finally adjourned, Elena gathered her materials quickly, hoping to slip out before he could approach her. She was not ready to face him, not after everything, not without time to process the storm of emotions currently raging inside her. She did not make it far. Elena. His voice, deeper and rougher than she remembered, stopped her cold, just outside the town hall doors. She turned slowly, finding him standing a few feet away, his hands shoved into his pockets, his expression unreadable, except for the intensity in his eyes. "You remember my name," she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "I never forgot it," Damon said quietly. "I only ever knew it because I asked Claire, months after that night. I looked for you, actually, more than once, though I never worked up the courage to reach out." Elena crossed her arms, refusing to let his words soften the years of hurt she had carried. "That's convenient timing, considering you were the one who told me to leave and never come back." Damon flinched, the words clearly hitting their mark. "I know. I have thought about that night more times than you could possibly imagine." "Why are you here, Damon?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. She did not have the emotional energy for a long, drawn-out conversation about the past. She needed answers, and she needed them quickly, before her carefully built composure crumbled entirely. "My pack owns the forest bordering this county," he said. "I came to observe the community center proposal, since it affects our shared boundary lines. I had no idea you would be the one presenting it." Elena absorbed this information slowly, her mind racing to reconcile the coincidence with everything else swirling through her thoughts. "So this is just a coincidence then? Great. Wonderful. I have to get back to my office." She turned to leave, but Damon's next words stopped her once again. "Elena, wait, please. I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk? Properly, I mean. There are things I should have explained 3 years ago, things I did not fully understand myself at the time." Elena hesitated, torn between the anger that told her to walk away and the curiosity that had never fully faded, despite her best efforts to bury it. She glanced back at him, taking in the sincerity written across his face, so different from the cold dismissal she remembered from their first meeting. "I don't owe you anything," she said finally. "I know," Damon said, "but I am asking anyway." Elena studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. Part of her wanted nothing more than to walk away and never think about Damon Cole again. But another part of her, the part that had spent 3 years wondering what exactly had happened that night, what he had meant by being tied to her, could not resist the pull toward answers she had never received. "Fine," she said finally, "but this doesn't mean anything has changed between us. I just want closure." Damon nodded, relief flooding his features. "That's fair. Thank you." As they arranged to meet later that week at a small cafe near the county line, neither of them fully understood the significance of what was about to unfold. Elena believed she was simply seeking answers to close a painful chapter of her past. Damon believed he was finally offering the explanation he owed her. Nothing more. Neither of them yet understood that the conversation ahead would not close anything at all. It would only be the beginning of everything they had both spent years running from. The cafe Damon had chosen sat at the edge of town, quiet and mostly empty in the late afternoon hours. Elena arrived early, choosing a table near the window where she could watch the street outside, giving herself something to focus on besides the nervous energy twisting through her stomach. She had spent the days leading up to this meeting trying to convince herself it meant nothing. She told Claire, who had reacted with immediate suspicion, that she simply wanted closure, an explanation for the strange rejection that had haunted her for years. Claire had not looked convinced, but she had wished her luck anyway, along with a warning to guard her heart carefully. Damon arrived exactly on time, dressed more casually than she had seen him at the town hall, though his presence still filled the small cafe with an undeniable weight. He spotted her immediately and made his way over, sliding into the seat across from her, with visible tension in his shoulders. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I said I would," Elena replied, keeping her tone carefully neutral. "So, explain. What happened that night? What did you mean about being tied to me?" Damon exhaled slowly, clearly gathering his thoughts before speaking. "There is a great deal about my world you do not know, and I am not certain how much I am permitted to share, but I will try to give you as much truth as I can." He explained, carefully and methodically, about the pack world, about wolves and their instincts, about the way certain individuals felt an undeniable pull toward the one person meant to be their lifelong partner. Elena listened, her expression shifting from skepticism to stunned disbelief as the pieces began falling into place. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that when you looked at me that night, some part of you recognized me as your mate?" "Yes," Damon admitted, the word clearly difficult for him to say aloud. "My wolf recognized you immediately. I have never felt anything like it, before or since." "Then why?" Elena asked, her voice tight with a mixture of hurt and confusion. "Would you reject something like that? Why would you treat me like I was something disgusting, something to be thrown away?" Damon's jaw clenched, guilt flashing across his features. "Because you are human, and I was raised to believe that an alpha's mate must be a wolf, I panicked. I let years of expectation override what I felt in that moment, and I have regretted it every single day since." Elena sat back in her chair, processing everything he had just told her. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to unleash 3 years of buried hurt and confusion onto the man sitting across from her. But another part of her, quieter and more curious, needed to understand more. Does this pull, this bond, does it explain anything else? Because I have this mark on my wrist that appeared that same night, and I never understood what it meant. Damon's eyes widened slightly. May I see it? Elena hesitated only a moment before extending her wrist across the table. Damon leaned closer, studying the faint crescent-shaped mark with an expression of dawning realization and dread. That is a rejection mark, he said quietly. It appears when a wolf's mate is turned away. It fades only when the bond is finally accepted. Elena stared at the mark, suddenly seeing it in an entirely different light. All those years of wondering, of unexplained aches and strange dreams she could never quite remember upon waking, suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. So this whole time, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I have been carrying a physical reminder of your rejection, and I never even knew it. I did not know either, Damon said. Not until recently. Not until my pack healer began noticing something wrong with my own energy, something she said was consistent with a rejected bond. Elena studied him more closely now, noticing for the first time the subtle exhaustion around his eyes, the way his energy seemed slightly diminished compared to the powerful, commanding presence she remembered from years ago. Are you telling me this bond has been hurting you too? Damon nodded slowly. Apparently so. My wolf has been suffering in silence for years, and I only recently began to understand why. A heavy silence settled between them as Elena absorbed everything he had shared. She had come here seeking closure, expecting a simple, if painful, explanation that would allow her to finally let go of the past. Instead, she had received something far more complicated, a truth that opened new questions rather than closing old wounds. What does this mean exactly? She finally asked. For us, I mean. If that's even a relevant question anymore. Damon met her gaze directly, sincerity written clearly across his features. I do not know what it means, honestly. I only know that seeing you again, after all this time, made something in me feel alive for the first time in years. I am not asking you to forgive me, Elena. I know I do not deserve that, not after what I did, but I would like the chance to know you properly this time, if you would allow it. Elena studied him for a long moment, torn between the anger she had carried for years and the undeniable pull she still felt toward him, despite everything. She thought about her carefully built life, her growing career, the independence she had fought so hard to establish. She was not the same woman who had walked out of that hall 3 years earlier, desperate for acceptance from a stranger who had made her feel unworthy. I need time, she finally said. This is a lot to process, Damon. You cannot expect me to simply forgive years of hurt because you have finally decided to be honest with me. I understand, Damon said, and he truly seemed to. Take whatever time you need. I am not going anywhere. They parted ways that afternoon, with no clear resolution, but something had shifted between them nonetheless. A door that had been firmly closed for 3 years, now standing slightly ajar. Elena drove home with her mind racing, unable to shake the memory of the sincerity in Damon's eyes, so different from the cold dismissal she remembered. She did not know, driving through the quiet streets toward her apartment, that her life was about to become far more complicated than she ever could have anticipated. She did not know that the community center project would require months of continued collaboration with the very packed territory bordering the county, ensuring that her path and Damon's would continue crossing whether either of them was fully ready or not. Fate, it seemed, was not finished with them yet. Weeks passed, and the community center project moved steadily forward, requiring regular meetings between Elena's design team and representatives from the coal pack, whose land bordered the proposed site. Diane, thrilled with the smooth progress of negotiations, had no idea of the complicated history between her lead designer and the pack's future alpha. Elena had expected the meetings to be awkward, filled with tension and unresolved feelings. Instead, she found herself surprised by how easily she and Damon fell into a professional rhythm, discussing boundary lines and environmental considerations with a level of mutual respect that neither of them had anticipated. Your design accounts for the seasonal wildlife migration patterns better than any proposal we have seen from human developers, Damon said during one meeting, reviewing her plans with genuine admiration. Most people do not consider how construction affects the deer population moving through this corridor. I did extensive research before finalizing the site plan, Elena replied, unable to keep a small note of pride from creeping into her voice. I wanted to make sure we were not disrupting the natural balance of the area. It shows, Damon said, and the warmth in his voice made her chest flutter in a way she quickly tried to suppress. Despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance, Elena found herself looking forward to their meetings more than she cared to admit. Damon had changed since their first encounter, or perhaps she was simply seeing a side of him he had kept carefully hidden that night 3 years ago. He was thoughtful, attentive, and genuinely invested in ensuring the project benefited both the county residents and the PAC's natural territory. Their conversations gradually extended beyond strict project matters. Damon began staying a few extra minutes after meetings, asking about her studies, her career goals, the path that had led her to architecture in the first place. Elena found herself answering more openly than she intended, drawn in by his genuine curiosity and the careful attention he paid to everything she said. "Why architecture?" he asked one afternoon, as they walked together toward the parking area after a particularly long meeting. "I always loved the idea of creating spaces where people feel like they belong," Elena said. "Growing up, my family moved around a lot, and I never quite felt settled anywhere. I think that is part of why I am so drawn to designing community spaces. I want other people to feel the sense of belonging I never really had as a child." Damon listened intently, something soft and understanding flickering across his features. "That makes sense, actually. I have watched you interact with the county residents during our meetings. You genuinely care about creating something meaningful for them, not just something impressive on paper." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, though she quickly reminded herself to guard against the growing pull she felt toward him. She had not forgiven him, not fully, not for the years of hurt his rejection had caused, but she also could not deny that the man standing before her now seemed genuinely different from the cold stranger who had dismissed her so harshly years ago. Meanwhile, back at PAC territory, Margaret had noticed a significant shift in Damon's energy over the past several weeks, a gradual strengthening that coincided precisely with the timeline of his renewed interactions with Elena. During his most recent checkup, she could not hide her relief at the improvement. "Whatever has changed in your life recently," Margaret said, studying her instruments with satisfaction, "keep doing it. Your energy is stronger than it has been in years." Damon said nothing, though a small, private smile crossed his face as he thought about the reason behind his renewed strength. He had not told Margaret about his meetings with Elena, uncertain how word might spread through the PAC if he revealed too much too soon. His courtship with Bianca had ended quietly a few weeks earlier, a mutual decision that both of them recognized as inevitable, given the lack of true connection between them. Bianca had taken the news with grace, though Damon suspected she harbored some resentment beneath her composed exterior. His father, Gerald, had questioned the sudden end of the courtship, concerned about the political implications for the PAC's alliances. Damon had offered vague explanations about compatibility issues, unwilling to reveal the truth about his rejected bond until he felt more certain about where things stood with Elena. For her part, Elena had begun confiding in Claire about her complicated feelings, torn between the anger she still carried and the undeniable connection she felt growing stronger with each meeting. "I don't know what I'm doing," Elena admitted one evening as they shared dinner at Elena's apartment. "Part of me wants to keep him at arm's length forever, considering how badly he hurt me. But another part of me can't stop thinking about him, can't stop looking forward to our meetings." Claire studied her friend carefully, concern evident in her expression. "Just be careful, Elena. I know this whole soulmate bond thing sounds romantic and faded, but he already proved once that he was willing to reject you when things got difficult. What happens if PAC pressures make him doubt himself again?" Elena considered her friend's warning seriously, recognizing the validity behind it. She had built a life for herself that did not depend on Damon Cole's acceptance, and she refused to let herself become vulnerable to the kind of hurt she had experienced 3 years earlier. "I'm not rushing into anything," Elena assured her. "I'm just allowing myself to see where this goes, carefully, with my eyes open this time." Despite her cautious approach, Elena could not deny the way her heart raced every time Damon walked into a room, or the way she found herself thinking about him during quiet moments throughout her day. Something was building between them, slow and steady, despite the painful history that had once torn them apart. Neither of them yet knew that their growing connection had not gone unnoticed within the pack, or that certain individuals were beginning to view their reunion as a serious threat to be dealt with before it could fully take root. Bianca Hart stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching Damon move through combat drills with the younger pack members, her expression carefully neutral despite the storm of emotions churning beneath the surface. She had heard the rumors circulating through the pack over the past few weeks, whispers about Damon's frequent trips into Ashford County, about a human woman connected to the community center project, who seemed to command an unusual amount of his attention. She had told herself, when their courtship ended, that she held no lingering resentment, that she understood the lack of connection between them, and wished Damon well in finding whatever he was truly searching for. But watching him now, noticing the subtle change in his demeanor, the way his energy had strengthened over recent weeks, she could not deny the sharp sting of jealousy twisting through her chest. She approached Nathan Reed, one of the pack elders who had long championed traditional values within their community, finding him seated in his usual spot near the pack house, reviewing paperwork related to upcoming pack matters. "Elder Reed," Bianca said, taking a seat across from him, "may I speak with you about something concerning?" Nathan looked up, his weathered face creasing with curiosity. "Of course, Bianca. What troubles you?" "I have heard troubling rumors," Bianca said carefully, "about Damon's involvement with a human woman from Ashford County. I fear the rumors may hold some truth, given his recent behavior." Nathan's expression darkened considerably. "A human woman? Surely you must be mistaken. Damon understands the importance of pack purity, the necessity of choosing a mate who can stand beside him as an equal in strength and heritage." "I hope I am mistaken," Bianca said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But I thought it wise to bring this to your attention, given your position within the pack council." Nathan nodded slowly, his mind already turning over the implications of such a possibility. The Cole pack had maintained strict traditions regarding mate selection for generations, believing firmly that human and wolf bonds weakened pack strength and invited unnecessary vulnerability. If Damon, the future alpha, were to break from this tradition, it could set a precedent that threatened everything their pack had built its identity upon. "I will look into this matter personally," Nathan said. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention, Bianca. Your loyalty to this pack does not go unnoticed." Bianca left the conversation with a small measure of satisfaction, though guilt gnawed quietly at her conscience. She told herself she was simply protecting pack traditions, ensuring the community's continued strength and stability. She refused to examine too closely the personal jealousy that had truly motivated her actions. Meanwhile, unaware of the concerns brewing among certain pack members, Elena had begun spending more time at pack territory, working closely with Damon and other pack representatives to finalize the community center's design details. She found herself increasingly comfortable within pack spaces, despite the curious and sometimes wary glances she received from wolves who had never before interacted closely with a human. Margaret, the pack healer, had taken a particular liking to Elena, often stopping by during meetings to offer refreshments and engage in friendly conversation. During one such visit, Margaret studied Elena with quiet, knowing eyes, noticing something she suspected Elena herself had not yet fully recognized. "You carry a rejection mark," Margaret said gently, gesturing toward Elena's wrist during a private moment between meetings. "I noticed it during our first introduction. May I ask how you came to have it?" Elena hesitated, uncertain how much to share, before deciding that honesty seemed appropriate, given Margaret's evident kindness. "Damon rejected me, years ago, before either of us understood what our connection meant." Margaret's expression softened with understanding. "I suspected as much, given the timing of his recent improvement in health. A rejected bond causes suffering to both parties involved. Elena, though the wolf's family and community are usually the only ones who recognize the physical signs. Is there a way for the mark to fully disappear?" Elena asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Only through complete acceptance of the bond," Margaret said. "A formal claiming, recognized by the pack, would heal both the physical and spiritual wounds the rejection caused. Elena absorbed this information carefully, uncertain how she felt about the idea of a formal claiming, whatever that might entail. She had grown genuinely fond of Damon over recent weeks, finding herself drawn to his quiet strength, his thoughtful nature, the way he listened intently whenever she spoke. But the idea of binding herself permanently to pack traditions and expectations felt overwhelming, especially given the wary glances she still occasionally received from certain pack members. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like that," Elena admitted. "This is all still very new to me." "Take your time," Margaret said kindly. "These things cannot be rushed, regardless of how the bond itself might urge otherwise. True acceptance must come freely, from both hearts, or it holds no real meaning." Elena appreciated Margaret's understanding, grateful to have found an ally within the sometimes intimidating pack community. She returned to her meeting with Damon that afternoon, carrying much to think about, her mind swirling with questions about what a future with him might actually look like. Questions she was not yet ready to fully confront. She did not know, as she drove home that evening, that Nathan Reed had already begun quietly gathering support among traditionalist pack members, preparing to oppose any potential relationship between their future alpha and a human woman, regardless of the fated bond that connected them. The pack, it seemed, was not yet ready to accept the truth that Damon himself was only beginning to embrace. Change, however necessary and fated, rarely comes without resistance, and the resistance building within the Cole pack was only just beginning to take shape. Damon called Elena on a quiet Thursday evening, his voice carrying a note of urgency she had not heard from him before. "Could you meet me tomorrow? There is something important I need to discuss with you, something I should have addressed sooner." Elena agreed, curiosity and a hint of nervousness settling in her stomach, as she wondered what could have prompted such urgency. They met the following afternoon at the same quiet cafe where they had first spoken honestly about the bond connecting them, though this time, Damon's expression carried a weight that immediately put Elena on alert. "What's wrong?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "I need to tell you something about pack traditions," Damon said, choosing his words carefully. "Something I should have explained from the beginning, before things between us progressed any further." Elena felt her stomach tighten with apprehension. "Go on." "Pack law recognizes fated bonds as sacred," Damon explained. "But historically, human mates have been viewed with suspicion, sometimes even hostility, by certain traditionalist members of our community. My rejection of you, all those years ago, stemmed partly from fear of exactly this kind of resistance." "Are you saying people are against us?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety building within her. "I have reason to believe some pack elders have learned about our connection," Damon said. "I do not yet know how deeply this concern has spread, but I wanted you to hear this from me directly, rather than discovering it through rumors or unfriendly encounters." Elena absorbed this information slowly, appreciating his honesty even as worry settled heavily in her chest. "What does this mean for us, practically speaking?" "It means," Damon said, reaching across the table to take her hand gently, "that if we choose to pursue this bond fully, we may face resistance from certain members of my community. I want you to understand that risk, clearly, before we go any further. I will not force you into a situation you are not prepared to handle." Elena studied their joined hands for a long moment, considering everything he had shared. She had grown to genuinely care for Damon over the past several weeks, finding in him a partner who listened, who respected her independence, who had worked diligently to prove himself worthy of the trust she had once withheld. The idea of facing resistance from his community frightened her, but it did not outweigh the growing certainty she felt about her feelings for him. "I appreciate you telling me this," she said finally, "but I am not interested in walking away simply because some people might disapprove. I have spent my whole life proving myself capable, despite people underestimating me. This would not be any different." Damon's expression shifted to something like awe, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "You continue to surprise me, Elena, every single time." Their conversation was interrupted by Damon's phone buzzing insistently in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening as he read the message. "I need to return to pack territory immediately," he said, standing quickly. "There is an emergency council meeting being called. I believe this concerns exactly what we just discussed. Elena rose as well, concern etched across her features. Should I come with you? Damon hesitated, clearly torn. I think it would be best if you allowed me to handle this first. I do not want you walking into a hostile situation unprepared. Elena nodded reluctantly, though every instinct urged her to insist on accompanying him. She trusted his judgment on this matter, recognizing that he understood pack politics far better than she did. Damon arrived at the pack house to find the council already assembled, Nathan Reed standing at the front of the room with an expression of grim determination. Gerald sat at the head of the table, his weathered face unreadable as Damon took his seat. We have called this meeting, Nathan began, to address concerning rumors regarding our future Alpha's involvement with a human woman. Damon straightened, meeting Nathan's gaze directly without flinching. The rumors are true. Elena Marsh is my fated mate. Gasps rippled through the assembled council members, though Gerald remained silent, studying his son with an unreadable expression that gave nothing away. This is unacceptable, Nathan said sharply. Our pack has never allowed a human to hold the position of Alpha's mate. The precedent this would set could weaken our entire community's standing among other packs. With respect, Elder Reed, Damon said, his voice steady despite the tension crackling through the room. Fated bonds are not choices we make lightly. My wolf recognized Elena the moment I first saw her. I rejected that bond once already, out of fear and adherence to outdated traditions, and I nearly destroyed both of us in the process. I will not make that mistake again. Your personal feelings do not override the needs of this pack, Nathan argued, his voice rising with barely contained frustration. An Alpha's duty is to his community first, his personal desires second. My duty, Damon countered firmly, is to lead this pack with strength and integrity, and that strength comes, in part, from the bond fate has given me. Denying that truth nearly cost me my health, my well-being, everything that makes me capable of leading effectively in the first place. The room fell into tense silence as Damon's words settled over the assembled council members. Gerald finally spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded respect throughout his decades as Alpha. I have watched my son struggle silently for years, Gerald said, though I did not fully understand the cause until recently. I have also watched him grow stronger, more confident, more capable, these past several weeks, coinciding precisely with his renewed connection to this woman. He paused, studying the room carefully. Perhaps it is time this pack reconsidered traditions that cause more harm than protection. Nathan's expression hardened with barely concealed frustration, but he said nothing further, recognizing the shift in the room's mood following Gerald's words. The meeting continued for another hour, covering the logistics and implications of formally recognizing a human mate, though the fundamental question of whether such recognition would ultimately be granted remained unresolved. Damon left the meeting feeling both relieved and unsettled, grateful for his father's support, but keenly aware that Nathan and his allies would not abandon their opposition easily. He drove immediately to Elena's apartment, needing to share everything that had transpired, uncertain how the coming days and weeks would unfold for either of them. The weeks following the council meeting brought a strange, uneasy tension to pack territory, one that Elena felt keenly every time she visited for project meetings. Some pack members greeted her warmly, curious and welcoming, while others regarded her with poorly concealed suspicion, their eyes tracking her movements with wary distrust. Nathan Reed had not abandoned his opposition, as Damon had predicted. He continued gathering support among traditionalist pack members, arguing passionately in private conversations that allowing a human mate to hold such a significant position would irreparably weaken the pack's standing and invite dangerous precedents for future generations. Bianca, though she had initially reported the rumors to Nathan out of jealousy, found herself growing increasingly uncomfortable with the direction his campaign had taken. She had witnessed several uncomfortable encounters between Elena and traditionalist pack members, moments where cruel words and cold dismissals had clearly wounded the human woman, despite Elena's efforts to maintain composure. One afternoon, Bianca found herself alone with Elena in the pack house kitchen, both women reaching for the coffee pot at the same moment. An awkward silence stretched between them before Bianca finally spoke. I owe you an apology, Bianca said quietly. I was the one who first brought concerns about your relationship with Damon to Elder Reed's attention. I acted out of jealousy, not genuine concern for pack traditions, and I am ashamed of the consequences that decision has caused you. Elena studied the other woman carefully, surprised by the unexpected honesty. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate that more than you probably realize. I have watched how Damon looks at you, Bianca continued. I never received that kind of attention from him, not once during our entire courtship. I understand now that what exists between you two is not something that can simply be replaced or replicated. I hope you can find happiness together, despite everyone working against you. Elena felt a surprising rush of gratitude toward Bianca, recognizing the courage it must have taken to offer such an honest apology. Thank you, Bianca. That means a great deal to me. The two women parted on considerably better terms than they had started, though Bianca's apology did little to slow Nathan's continued campaign against their relationship. He had begun formally petitioning the Pack Council to establish a vote regarding Pack law changes necessary to recognize a human mate, believing that a formal vote would ultimately favor tradition over Damon's personal wishes. Damon, for his part, refused to back down, spending countless hours preparing arguments and gathering support from Pack members sympathetic to his cause. He met privately with individual council members, sharing his personal experience of suffering through years of a rejected bond, hoping his vulnerability might sway even the most traditional minds toward compassion and understanding. Elena continued working diligently on the community center project, refusing to let the mounting pressure from Pack politics interfere with her professional responsibilities. The project had progressed beautifully, construction beginning ahead of schedule, community excitement building steadily as county residents watched their new gathering space take shape. Despite the external pressures surrounding their relationship, Elena and Damon's bond continued strengthening, each day bringing them closer together, despite the obstacles determined to keep them apart. Damon had begun spending more time in Ashford County, helping Elena with various project logistics, while also simply enjoying the normalcy of time spent away from Pack politics. Sometimes I wish we could just disappear somewhere, Elena admitted one evening as they walked together along the edge of the forest, bordering the community center construction site. Somewhere none of this mattered, where we could just be two people falling in love without an entire community weighing in on whether that love is acceptable. Damon squeezed her hand gently, understanding the weariness behind her words. I know this has not been easy for you. I am more grateful than I can express for your patience and strength through all of this. I'm not going anywhere, Elena said firmly, meeting his gaze with quiet determination. Whatever happens with the Pack Council, whatever Nathan Reed and his supporters decide, I am not walking away from you again. Damon's expression softened with emotion, gratitude and love mixing together in his storm-gray eyes. Neither am I. Not this time. Not ever again. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the trees, both of them drawing strength from the certainty they had finally found in each other, despite everything still standing between them and the future they both desperately wanted to build together. The formal council vote regarding Pack law changes had been scheduled for the following month, a date that loomed over both of them with increasing significance as the weeks passed. Everything they had built together, every ounce of trust and love they had carefully constructed since Elena's return into Damon's life, now rested on the outcome of a single, crucial decision that neither of them could fully control. The morning of the council vote arrived with a heavy gray sky, clouds hanging low over Pack territory, as if the weather itself understood the significance of the day ahead. Elena had barely slept the night before, her mind racing through countless scenarios, none of which she felt fully prepared to face. Damon arrived at her apartment early, dressed formally for the occasion, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed the composed exterior he was trying to maintain. "Are you ready?" he asked, though the question seemed to carry more weight than a simple inquiry about timing. "As ready as I can be," Elena said, taking a steadying breath. "Let's go." They drove to Pack territory together in tense silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts about the day's potential outcomes. The Great Hall, the same space where Damon had once rejected Elena so publicly and painfully, now stood ready to host a very different kind of decision, one that would determine whether their fated bond would finally be recognized and celebrated, or forever condemned by the very community Damon was meant to lead. The hall filled quickly with pack members, far more attending than typical council meetings usually drew. Word of the significant vote had spread throughout the entire pack, drawing curious and concerned wolves eager to witness the historic decision firsthand. Nathan Reed stood near the front of the room, flanked by several traditionalist supporters, his expression carrying grim determination as the meeting was called to order. Gerald took his seat at the head of the council table, his weathered face carefully neutral despite the significance of the day. "We gather today," Gerald announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall, "to vote on a matter of great importance to our pack's future. My son, Damon Cole, has petitioned this council to formally recognize his fated bond with Elena Marsh, a human woman, as a legitimate mate bond, deserving of full pack recognition." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd, though they quieted quickly as Nathan stepped forward to speak. "This council must consider carefully the precedent such recognition would establish," Nathan said, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Our pack has maintained strength and unity for generations, through careful adherence to tradition. Allowing a human mate to hold such a significant position risks weakening everything our ancestors worked to build." Damon stepped forward before Nathan could continue, his gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd with quiet but unmistakable authority. "Elder Reed speaks of tradition and strength, but I ask this council to consider what true strength actually means. I spent 3 years suffering silently, my health steadily weakening, because I rejected a bond that fate itself had chosen for me. I nearly destroyed myself trying to conform to expectations that had nothing to do with genuine strength, and everything to do with fear of change." He turned to address the crowd directly, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "Elena Marsh is not a weakness to be tolerated or hidden away. She is brilliant, compassionate, and stronger than many wolves I have known throughout my life. She has faced hostility and suspicion from this very community with grace and patience that few among us could match. If this pack cannot recognize genuine strength simply because it comes wrapped in human skin, then perhaps it is our traditions, not our bonds, that require reconsideration." Silence fell over the hall as Damon's words settled over the crowd. Elena, standing quietly near the entrance where she had once been forced to leave in humiliation, felt tears prick at her eyes, moved by the conviction and passion in Damon's voice. Margaret stepped forward next, her position as pack healer granting her words significant weight among the assembled crowd. "I can personally testify to the physical toll a rejected bond takes on both parties involved. I watched Damon's health decline steadily for years, unable to determine the cause until recently. Since renewing his connection with Elena, his strength has returned more fully than I have witnessed in over a decade. Whatever else this council decides, I ask you to consider the very real, very physical consequences of denying a genuine fated bond." More voices began rising from the crowd, some in support of tradition, others increasingly swayed by Damon's passionate defense and Margaret's medical testimony. Bianca stepped forward as well, surprising many in attendance with her willingness to speak on Elena's behalf. "I confess that jealousy first motivated me to raise concerns about this bond," Bianca admitted, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "But I have since witnessed firsthand the genuine connection between Damon and Elena, and the grace with which Elena has endured hostility from members of our own community. I believe our pack would be stronger, not weaker, by welcoming her rather than rejecting her." Nathan attempted to argue further, but the momentum in the room had clearly shifted, more and more pack members nodding in agreement with the testimonies they had just witnessed. Gerald finally called for the formal vote, and as hands rose throughout the hall, it quickly became clear that the majority stood firmly in support of recognizing Damon and Elena's bond. The final count confirmed what the room's mood had already suggested. The vote passed overwhelmingly in favor of formal recognition, granting Damon and Elena the pack's blessing to complete their bond according to traditional pack customs. Elena felt overwhelming relief wash over her as Damon crossed the hall to reach her, his expression filled with joy and gratitude that mirrored her own emotions perfectly. He took her hands gently in his storm-gray eyes shining with unshed tears. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it. We did it together," Elena corrected softly, squeezing his hands as the surrounding crowd erupted into applause and celebration. Nathan Reed quietly exited the hall, defeated, but not entirely without dignity, recognizing that the pack's collective will had spoken clearly, even against his personal objections. Damon made a mental note to speak with him privately in coming weeks, hoping to find common ground despite their disagreement, understanding that unity within the pack mattered more than winning an argument decisively. For now, though, he allowed himself simply to celebrate the moment he had waited years to fully claim, standing beside the woman his wolf had recognized from the very first moment they met, finally free from the fear and tradition that had once torn them apart. The claiming ceremony was scheduled for the following full moon, giving Elena and Damon several weeks to prepare for the traditional pack ritual that would formally and spiritually bind them together. Margaret guided Elena through the customs and significance of the ceremony, patiently answering every question Elena brought to her during their preparation sessions. The ceremony itself is simple, Margaret explained during one of their meetings. It involves an exchange of vows before the full pack, followed by a ritual that allows Damon's wolf to fully accept you as his mate, healing both the rejection marks you carry and completing the bond fate designed for you both. Will it hurt? Elena asked, genuine curiosity rather than fear coloring her question. There may be a brief moment of intensity, Margaret said honestly, but most mates describe the sensation as overwhelming warmth rather than pain, a feeling of finally settling into place after years of searching for something missing. Elena found herself growing increasingly excited as the ceremony approached, the earlier anxiety and uncertainty gradually giving way to genuine anticipation. She had spent weeks getting to know pack members more deeply, building friendships with wolves who had initially regarded her with suspicion, but had since come to respect and even admire her resilience and dedication. The community center project had also reached its final stages, the building now standing complete and ready for its grand opening, a beautiful testament to Elena's design skill and her ability to bridge the gap between human and pack communities. Diane had been thrilled with the finished project, praising Elena's work as some of the finest her firm had ever produced. You should be incredibly proud of yourself, Diane told her during a final walkthrough of the completed building. This project will serve this community for generations, and it never would have turned out this beautifully without your vision and dedication. Elena felt immense pride surveying the finished community center, its wide windows flooding the space with natural light exactly as she had envisioned, its flexible community spaces already scheduled to host everything from children's programs to town meetings. She had created something lasting and meaningful, a physical symbol of the bridges she had personally worked to build between two very different worlds. As the day of the claiming ceremony finally arrived, Elena found herself standing in a small preparation room within the pack house, dressed in a beautiful gown that Margaret had helped her select, her hands trembling slightly with nervous excitement. Claire had come to support her, helping with final preparations while offering words of encouragement. "You look absolutely radiant," Claire said, adjusting a stray strand of Elena's hair. "I am so happy for you, truly. After everything you have been through, you deserve every bit of happiness this day is about to bring you. Thank you for standing by me through all of this," Elena said, embracing her friend warmly. "I could not have gotten here without your support." The Great Hall had been transformed for the occasion, decorated with flowers and soft lighting that created an atmosphere of warmth and celebration, entirely different from the cold, harsh judgment Elena had experienced there years earlier. Pack members filled the space, their expressions now warm and welcoming, rather than suspicious and hostile. Damon waited at the front of the hall, dressed formally, his eyes lighting up with unmistakable joy the moment Elena entered the room. She walked toward him slowly, taking in the sight of the community that had once rejected her now standing united, in celebration of the bond they had finally embraced. Gerald stood beside them to officiate the ceremony, his voice carrying warmly through the silent hall as he spoke about the significance of fated bonds and the strength that comes from embracing, rather than fearing what fate has chosen. "Damon Cole," Gerald said, "do you accept Elena Marsh as your true mate, promising to honor, protect, and cherish the bond your wolf recognized from the very first moment you met her?" "I do," Damon said, his voice steady and filled with certainty. "I accept her fully," without reservation, and I promise to spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of the love and patience she has shown me. Elena Marsh, Gerald continued, turning to her with warmth in his weathered eyes. Do you accept Damon Cole as your true mate, promising to stand beside him through whatever challenges your future together may bring? I do, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, filled with a certainty she had not expected to feel so completely. I accept him fully, and everything that comes with loving him, including this incredible community I have come to care for deeply. As Gerald completed the ceremony, guiding them through the final ritual that would seal their bond permanently, Elena felt a warmth spread through her entire body, starting at her wrist where the rejection mark had lived for years, before spreading outward until it filled every part of her being. She watched, amazed, as the pale crescent mark on her wrist finally faded completely, the visible reminder of years of pain and separation disappearing entirely as their bond reached its full completion. Damon felt the same overwhelming warmth spreading through him, his wolf finally settling into peaceful contentment after years of restless suffering. He pulled Elena close, and as their lips met in a gentle, promising kiss, the entire hall erupted into joyful celebration, applause and howls of approval echoing through the space that had once witnessed such painful rejection. Standing together, finally united after years of obstacles and heartache, Damon and Elena embraced not just each other, but the beautiful, complicated future stretching out before them. The community center Elena had designed stood as a lasting testament to bridges built between different worlds, and their bond stood as proof that fate, however long delayed, always finds its way home to those patient and brave enough to embrace it fully. Outside, the full moon hung bright and silver in the clear night sky, its light bathing the celebrating crowd in a soft, welcoming glow, as if the universe itself was finally at peace with the love that had overcome every obstacle placed in its path.